Leave your house keys. You're not welcome here. That's what my sister said standing up at our family's Christmas party, her voice cutting through the clinking glasses and holiday chatter. She raised her wine glass like it was a toast, but her words were a blade. In front of our entire family, cousins, aunts, uncles, she declared I didn't deserve the house I'd built with my own money. My mom smirked, her eyes glinting with something cold. My dad just stared at his plate. No one spoke. The room felt like it was holding its breath. I didn't scream or beg. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and set them on my plate right between the roasted turkey and cranberry sauce. Then I looked at them, my sister, my parents, and said, "It's okay. The bank will be glad to see you." I turned, walked out into the freezing December night, and shut the door behind me. They didn't know the house was in my name alone, or that the next morning the bank would call them about a $1.2 million loan they tried to pull behind my back. That moment changed everything. If this family betrayal hits home, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about the wildest holiday drama you've seen. Let's dive into how this Christmas party turned into my fight for everything I'd built. Let me take you back to where this all started before that Christmas party flipped my life upside down. I'm Jennifer Brooks, and I'd spent years grinding as an interior designer, taking every freelance gig to save for something my family thought was a long shot, a house of my own. Growing up in Asheville, North Carolina, I was the one who kept my head down. I got good grades, paid my bills, and never asked for help. Amanda, my sister, was the opposite, always chasing some half-baked idea, quitting jobs faster than she started them, and leaning on our parents to clean up her messes. They called her creative, the one who needed a safety net. Me, I was just Jennifer, expected to fend for myself. At 28, I found a beat-up craftsman house on the edge of town. It wasn't much: faded paint, creaky floors, a roof leaking in 3 spots, but I saw what it could be. I'd saved $60,000 every cent from late nights sketching layouts and picking out tiles for clients. No one else in the family gave that house a second thought. Amanda scoffed, called it a money pit. My parents didn't even bother to drive by. But I didn't need their validation. I signed the mortgage, $200,000, 30 years, no co-signers, just me. That first night, standing in the empty living room with a flashlight, I felt something rare: pride. Fixing that house became my everything. I learned to wield a sander, replaced every window myself, and spent weekends covered in drywall dust. I turned the sagging porch into a wraparound deck, painted the walls warm ivory, and built a kitchen island with my own hands. It took 3 years and every dollar I could spare. I'd come home from client meetings, throw on overalls, and work past midnight. Amanda stopped by, once glanced at the half-finished floors, and said, "Why bother? It's just you." My parents never showed up, too busy bailing Amanda out, rent, car payments, whatever she needed. When the house was finished, it looked like it belonged in a magazine. Oak floors glowed under skylights I'd installed. The backyard had a stone fire pit I built from scratch. Neighbors started dropping by, asking for tours. Suddenly, Amanda took notice. She'd call, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, saying, "That place is so big for one person." Or, "Imagine how happy my son would be with a yard like that." My nephew, her 6-year-old, was a sweet kid with a gap-toothed grin. She'd bring him over, let him run around, then hint they needed a stable home. My parents joined in. My mom would say, "You've done so well, Jennifer. You should share your blessings." My dad, quieter but sharp, asked once, "That house is a lot for one person to handle, isn't it?" I brushed it off at first. I wanted to believe they were just being family, maybe even proud. But their words lingered like a warning you don't heed until it's too late. I'd poured everything into that house: my savings, my time, my heart. It wasn't just a building. It was proof I could create something lasting, something mine. Yet every time Amanda or my parents brought it up, a knot tightened in my gut, like they were eyeing something I'd fought for alone. Looking back, I should have caught the hints. Their questions weren't random. They were calculated, setting the stage for that Christmas party when everything I'd built was nearly ripped away. After those early comments about my house, I tried to focus on my work, my routine, anything to shake the unease creeping into my thoughts. I'd spent years building that craftsman into my sanctuary, but Amanda's sudden interest and my parents' offhand remarks started to feel like warning signs. It wasn't just their words, it was the way they lingered, like they were testing me, probing for weak spots. I'd catch myself double-checking the locks at night, wondering why their questions about my house felt so pointed. Amanda started showing up more often, always with my nephew in tow. She'd walk through my living room, eyeing the skylights, running her hand over the oak banister I'd refinished. "This place is too much for one person," she'd say, her voice casual but sharp, like she was planting a seed. Once she brought up her son's school, how he needed a better environment, a bigger yard. "He'd love it here," she said, watching me closely. I smiled, offered her coffee, but my stomach twisted. She wasn't just visiting, she was sizing up my home. My nephew would race around the deck laughing, and I'd feel a pang of guilt for suspecting her. He was just a kid caught in her plans. Then my mom started calling. She'd never been one for small talk, but suddenly she was full of questions. "Do you have all the paperwork for that house sorted?" she asked one afternoon, her tone too sweet, like she was fishing for something. "You know it's a big responsibility owning property." I mumbled something about having everything filed, but her words stuck. Why did she care now? She hadn't asked about the house when I was tearing out rotten floorboards or maxing out my credit card for new plumbing. My dad was subtler, but no less strange. During a rare dinner at their place, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You ever think about putting the house in a family trust? It'd be easier to manage, easier for who I wanted to ask," but I just nodded, my fork hovering over my plate. The questions kept coming, each one a little bolder. Amanda called one evening, asking if I'd ever considered adding a co-owner to the deed. For tax purposes, she said, like she'd read it in a manual. I laughed it off, told her I had it under control, but my hands were shaking when I hung up. Another time, my mom dropped by unannounced, first time in years, and asked to see my mortgage papers. "Just to make sure you're protected," she said, her eyes darting to my file cabinet. I said they were with my accountant, a lie that came too easily. She didn't push, but her smile was tight, like she knew I was dodging her. By summer, their hints weren't hints anymore. Amanda started talking about her son's future, how he deserved a stable home, how my house was practically a family asset. My parents backed her up, their voices soft but insistent. "You've always been so independent, Jennifer," my mom said once, her hand on my arm. "But family shares. That's what we do." Shares what I thought? The house I'd paid for alone. The knot in my gut tightened, a mix of anger and dread. I started keeping my documents in a safe, not just the file cabinet. I'd lie awake replaying their words, wondering what they were planning. One night, Amanda texted me a photo of my nephew playing in my backyard, captioned, "This could be his home someday." That's when it hit me. They weren't just talking. They were building up to something bigger, something that would unravel everything I'd worked for. I didn't know what yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Their words, their visits, their questions, they were pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve, but I had to. That Christmas party was just months away, and I had no idea how far they'd go. By December, the unease I'd felt for months had settled into a quiet dread, like a storm you know is coming, but can't predict. I'd locked my documents in a safe, checked my mortgage statements twice a week, but nothing prepared me for what happened at our family's Christmas party. It was hosted at my parents' house in Asheville, a tradition since I was a kid. I walked in carrying a homemade pecan pie, hoping for a night of peace despite the warning signs. The dining room buzzed with cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone laughing, passing plates of ham and mashed potatoes, the air thick with holiday cheer. I forced a smile, trying to blend in, but Amanda's glances kept catching me off guard. Halfway through dinner, Amanda stood up, her wine glass raised like she was about to give a toast. The room went quiet, forks pausing midair. "Jennifer doesn't need that big house all to herself," she said, her voice loud, steady, slicing through the chatter. "She's not even starting a family. It's not fair to keep it from those who need it like my son." My nephew, sitting next to her, looked down, picking at his plate. My chest tightened, but I didn't speak. I looked at my mom, hoping she'd say something, anything. Instead, she smirked, her lips curling in a way that made my blood run cold. My dad stared at his napkin, his hands folded tight. No one else moved. Cousins froze. Aunts avoided my eyes. Uncles shifted in their seats. Amanda wasn't done. "Leave your house keys, Jennifer," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "You're not welcome to keep it all to yourself." The words hit like a slap, echoing in the silent room. I felt every stare, every held breath, but I didn't flinch. My mind raced months of their questions, their hints, Amanda's visits, my mom's fake concern about my paperwork. It all clicked. They weren't just asking for my house. They thought they could take it. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the cold metal of my keys. I pulled them out, set them on my plate next to the untouched turkey, and looked straight at Amanda, then my mom, then my dad. "It's okay," I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "The bank will be glad to see you." Amanda's smile faltered just for a second. My mom's smirk vanished. My dad's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. I didn't wait for a response. I pushed my chair back, stood and walked out the front door, slamming behind me. The December air stung my face as I stepped into the night, my breath visible under the streetlights. I didn't cry or scream. I just kept walking, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and clarity. Their boldness at the Christmas party, so public and unapologetic, showed they believed they had me trapped. But I wasn't defenseless. I'd secured my documents in a safe months ago, sensing their intentions weren't innocent. I'd been checking my mortgage statements religiously, watching for any hint of tampering. As I walked away from my parents' house that night, I knew something was coming. The next morning, a call from the bank would reveal just how far they'd gone to claim what I'd built with my own hands. The morning after the Christmas party, I woke up in a cheap Asheville hotel room, the weight of Amanda's words still pressing on my chest. Her demand to leave my keys, my mom's smirk, my dad's silence. It all replayed like a bad movie. I'd barely slept, my mind stuck on that moment. I set my keys on the table and walked out. My phone sat on the nightstand, buzzing with unread messages from Amanda and my parents. I ignored them, splashing cold water on my face, trying to shake the anger and betrayal. I knew they were up to something, but I didn't know how deep it went. Not yet. At 8:17 a.m., my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Ms. Brooks, this is Karen from First Asheville Bank." A woman's voice said, calm but urgent. "We need to discuss an issue with your property." My stomach dropped. "What issue?" I asked, gripping the phone. She hesitated, then said, "Someone attempted to secure a $1.2 million loan against your house, using documents with your name. We flagged it as irregular. Can you come in?" I froze, the words hitting like a punch. $1.2 million. My house was worth maybe $300,000 tops. This wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. I asked Karen to email me the details and hung up, my hands shaking. The email came through minutes later, a PDF attachment with scanned documents. There was my name, my address, but the signature wasn't mine. Close, but not mine. Someone had tried to forge it, tying my house to a loan I'd never applied for. Amanda's voice echoed in my head. "You're not welcome to keep it all to yourself." My mom's smirk, my dad's silence. They thought they could pull this off, use my house as collateral for a fortune. My comment about the bank last night wasn't just a jab, it was truer than I'd realized. I didn't waste time. I Googled property lawyer Asheville and found Sarah Newman, a name that popped up with 5-star reviews. I called her office, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside. "I need help," I told her receptionist. Someone's trying to take my house. They squeezed me in that afternoon. Sarah Newman's office was small but sharp polished wood desk shelves packed with legal books. She was about 40 with a no-nonsense stare that made me feel like I'd found the right person. I handed her the bank's email, the forged documents, and told her everything: Amanda's demands, my parents' questions about my paperwork, the Christmas party showdown. Sarah leaned back, scanning the pages. "This is serious misrepresentation," she said. "They tried to leverage your property without your consent. We can stop this, but we need to act fast." Sarah explained the next steps, requesting a fraud investigation from the bank, pulling my property records, and filing a formal complaint. "Who do you think did this?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Amanda," I said. "And probably my parents." Saying it out loud hurt like admitting a wound I'd ignored too long. Sarah nodded, no judgment in her eyes. "Family cases are tough," she said, "but we'll get to the bottom of it. First, we secure your title." I felt a flicker of relief, like I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Back at the hotel, I pored over the documents again. The forged signature was sloppy, but the intent was clear. Amanda and my parents had planned this for months, maybe longer. Those questions about my mortgage, the hints about sharing the house. It wasn't just greed, it was calculated. They'd used my nephew as a prop, banking on my guilt to make me cave. But they'd underestimated me. I'd fought for that house, every nail, every payment. I wasn't letting them take it. I called Karen at the bank, confirming I'd never authorized the loan. She promised to freeze the application and launch an internal review. "We'll need your affidavit," she said. I agreed, my mind already racing to the next step. Sarah had warned me this was just the beginning. Proving the fraud would mean digging into records, maybe facing Amanda and my parents in court. The thought made my stomach churn, but it also lit a fire. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't backing down. That night, lying in the hotel bed, I felt something shift. The betrayal still stung, but I had a plan. And I had Sarah. Whatever came next, I was ready. The weeks after the bank's call were a blur of paperwork and late-night calls with Sarah. I'd never been to court before, but now I was knee-deep in affidavits, property records, and emails from the bank. Sarah was relentless, digging into every detail of the $1.2 million loan someone had tried to pin on my house. I stayed in that Asheville hotel, avoiding my parents' calls and Amanda's texts. I wasn't ready to face them, not until I had answers. Sarah warned me this wouldn't be easy. "Family disputes get messy," she said, flipping through the forged documents. "But we've got a strong case. The bank's already flagged the misrepresentation." Sarah's team pulled my original mortgage records, proving I'd never authorized a second loan. The bank sent over more evidence: emails, application forms, even a digital trail showing someone had used my name and address. The signature was almost convincing, but it wasn't mine. Sarah pointed out inconsistencies: the handwriting wobbled, the dates didn't line up with my financial history. "This was sloppy," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "Whoever did this underestimated you." I nodded, my jaw tight. I knew who it was: Amanda, with my parents' backing. The thought of them sitting around planning to take my house made my chest ache, but I pushed it down. Anger was better than heartbreak right now. We filed a formal complaint against the loan application, naming Amanda and my parents as potential culprits. Sarah explained we'd need to prove their involvement in court, which meant a hearing. The bank cooperated, sending a representative named Karen to confirm the loan was flagged the moment it hit their system. "Your comment about the bank at the Christmas party," Sarah said, half smiling. "It was like you knew." I didn't, not really, but I'd sensed their plan was bigger than Amanda's words at that dinner table. The hearing was set for late January, barely a month after the party. I barely slept, replaying Amanda's demand, my mom's smirk, my dad's silence. Sarah prepped me for weeks: how to answer questions, stay calm, stick to the facts. "They'll try to twist this," she warned. "Make it about family, not the law." I wasn't worried about their words. I was worried about seeing them, about looking into their eyes and knowing they'd betrayed me. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, all dark wood and fluorescent lights. I sat next to Sarah, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Amanda walked in first, her head high like she hadn't done anything wrong. My mom followed, her face blank, no smirk this time. My dad came last, avoiding my gaze. My nephew wasn't there, thank God. I didn't want him caught in this. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes, called the case. Sarah presented our evidence, the forged documents, my mortgage records, the bank's testimony. Karen took the stand, explaining how the loan application raised red flags, wrong signatures, mismatched financial data. Amanda's lawyer argued it was a misunderstanding, claiming she'd only explored options for a family investment. I almost laughed. A $1.2 million loan wasn't an exploration, it was a calculated move. Sarah didn't let it slide. She pressed Karen, who confirmed the application listed Amanda as the primary beneficiary with my parents as co-signers. My heart sank, even though I'd known it was coming. They'd used my house as collateral, banking on me, folding under pressure. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my voice steady. I bought that house with my own money, I said. I fixed it with my own hands. They never helped, never cared until they saw a chance to profit. Amanda shifted in her seat, her face tight. My mom stared at the floor. My dad's hands twitched, but he said nothing. The judge watched me, her pen pausing. Sarah followed up, showing emails between Amanda and a loan officer sent weeks before the Christmas party. They'd planned it all along, using my nephew as an excuse, my trust as a weakness. The hearing stretched on, with Sarah dismantling their defense piece by piece. Amanda's lawyer tried to paint me as selfish, hoarding a house too big for one person. Sarah countered with my financial records, proving every payment came from my account. By the end, the courtroom was quiet, the air heavy with tension. I looked at Amanda, waiting for her to meet my eyes. She didn't. My parents didn't either. They'd gambled on taking what was mine, and they were losing. The judge said she'd review the evidence and rule soon. As we left, Sarah squeezed my arm. "You did good," she said. I nodded, but inside I felt hollow. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about family, or what was left of it. 3 weeks after the hearing, Sarah called. "We got the ruling," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The judge voided the loan application. The house is yours, Jennifer. No liens, no claims." My knees buckled and I sank onto the hotel bed, relief washing over me like a wave. The bank's investigation had backed us up. Karen's testimony about the forged documents was airtight. The judge ruled the $1.2 million loan attempt was a clear case of misrepresentation, with Amanda and my parents named as the responsible parties. Sarah added, "They're facing penalties, maybe even a fraud investigation. You're clear." I should have felt like celebrating, but the victory was bittersweet. My house was safe, but my family wasn't. I drove back to my Craftsman that afternoon, the oak floors and skylights welcoming me like an old friend. I walked through every room, touching the banister. I'd refinished the kitchen island I'd built. This was mine, not because of a judge's ruling, but because I'd earned it. Still, Amanda's words from the Christmas party echoed. "You're not welcome to keep it all to yourself." My mom's smirk. My dad's silence. They'd tried to take it all, and for what? A quick payout. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Sarah met me at her office the next day to wrap up paperwork. "You've got options now," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "You could press charges, push for damages." I shook my head. The idea of dragging Amanda and my parents through another court case felt like sinking deeper into their mess. I just wanted it over. "What about my nephew?" I asked. He was the only one I still cared about, the only one who hadn't chosen this fight. Sarah sighed. "He's a minor, so he's not involved. But reaching out might be tricky with Amanda in the picture." I nodded, my throat tight. I missed his gap-toothed smile, his laughter on my deck. But he was tied to them, and I couldn't risk that. That night, I sat on my porch, the February air crisp against my skin. I wrote 3 letters. One to Amanda, one to my mom, one to my dad. I didn't mince words. You tried to take what I built, I wrote to Amanda. I trusted you, and you used my nephew to guilt me. We're done. To my mom. Your smirk at that party said more than words ever could. I don't need a mother who'd rather see me lose. To my dad, your silence was worse than their lies. I deserved better. I mailed the letters the next day, no return address. I didn't want replies. I didn't want apologies. I wanted a clean break. Cutting them off wasn't easy. I'd spent years trying to be the good daughter, the reliable sister, hoping they'd see me for who I was. But they only saw what they could gain. I called Sarah to confirm I wouldn't pursue further charges. I just want to move forward, I told her. She understood, her voice soft but supportive. You're stronger than they are, she said. I wasn't sure about that, but I was learning. I started small, changing my phone number, blocking their emails. I told my cousins and aunts what happened, not for gossip, but to set the record straight. Some reached out, shocked, offering support. Others stayed silent, loyal to my parents. That hurt, but it clarified things. I didn't need a big family, just one I could trust. My nephew was the hardest part. I set up a small savings account for him, something Amanda couldn't touch for when he's older. It wasn't much, but it was my way of keeping him in my life, even from a distance. Back in my house, I felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried too long. The victory wasn't just about the house, it was about reclaiming my life. Amanda and my parents could face their consequences without me. I'd fought for what was mine, and I'd won. Now I had to decide what came next, not just for the house, but for me. The road ahead felt open, uncertain, but mine to walk. A year had passed since that awful Christmas party, and I was determined to make this one different. I stood in my craftsman house in Asheville, the oak floors gleaming under the skylights I'd installed with my own hands. The smell of roasted turkey and pecan pie filled the air, mixing with the crackle of the fire pit outside. I'd invited friends, neighbors, and a few co-workers to my first Christmas party, hosted on my terms. No Amanda, no parents, no tension waiting to explode. Just people who'd shown up for me when it mattered most. As I set out plates on the kitchen island I'd built, I felt a quiet pride, not just for the house, but for the life I was carving out. Last Christmas, Amanda's words had cut deep. Leave your house keys, you're not welcome. My mom's smirk and my dad's silence had burned even worse. Walking out of that party, I'd felt alone, betrayed by the family I'd tried so hard to please. But now, standing in my living room, surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Sarah, my lawyer, was there, sipping wine and joking with my neighbor about Asheville's winter chill. My co-worker Jess, who'd brought a homemade cranberry sauce, was telling stories about her kids. My friend Mark, who'd helped me repaint the porch last spring, was carving the turkey, his apron splattered with gravy. These were my people now, my real family, not bound by blood, but by choice. I'd spent the year rebuilding not just my house, but myself. After the judge's ruling secured my home, I'd cut off Amanda and my parents for good. Their letters sent months ago sat unopened in a drawer. I didn't need their apologies or excuses. They'd tried to take what I'd built using a forged loan application to claim a fortune that wasn't theirs. The bank's evidence, paired with Sarah's relentless work, had stopped them cold. My offhand comment that night, "The bank will be glad to see you," had turned out to be more prophetic than I'd known. But the victory wasn't just about keeping the house. It was about learning who I could trust and who I couldn't. I thought about my nephew often, his gap-toothed smile still vivid in my mind. He was 7 now, caught in Amanda's world, and that stung. I'd added to his savings account every month, a small gesture to show I hadn't forgotten him. I hoped one day he'd understand, maybe even reach out when he was older. For now, I had to let him go, like I'd let go of Amanda, my mom, and my dad. Cutting those ties had been painful, like losing a piece of myself, but it was also freeing. I didn't have to prove my worth to them anymore. I never should have had to. As the party hummed along, I stepped onto the wraparound deck, the fire pit casting a warm glow. Jess joined me, handing me a mug of hot cider. "You've got a good thing here, Jen," she said, nodding toward the house. I smiled, the warmth of the mug seeping into my hands. "Took a while to get here," I said. She didn't know the whole story, just bits I'd shared about family drama, but she didn't need to. She'd shown up with that cranberry sauce, no questions asked. That was enough. I looked around at the faces in my home, friends who'd helped me move furniture, neighbors who'd dropped off casseroles when I was stuck in that hotel, Sarah who'd fought for me when I couldn't fight alone. This was what family meant, I realized. Not the people who shared your last name, but the ones who saw your value, who stood by you when things got hard. My parents had called me selfish for keeping this house. Amanda had said it was too big for one person. They were wrong. This house was exactly the right size for the life I was building, for the people I chose to fill it with. The past year hadn't been easy. I'd questioned myself, wondered if I could have done things differently to avoid the fight. But every time I walked through my front door, saw the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd sanded, I knew I'd made the right choice. This house wasn't just a building. It was proof I could stand on my own, proof I didn't need their approval. I'd fought for it, not just in court, but every day I chose to keep going, to build something better than what they'd tried to take. As the night wound down, I raised a glass, my voice steady. "To new beginnings," I said, looking at the faces around me. "And to the people who make them possible." Everyone cheered, their voices filling the room with warmth. Sarah caught my eye, giving me a nod. Mark shouted to Jen's badass house, and the laughter that followed felt like a release, like letting go of the last shadows of that old Christmas party. I thought about what I'd learned, what I'd carry forward. Family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who shows up, who stays when the stakes are high. I'd lost the family I was given, but I'd found one I chose. And that was worth more than any house, any victory. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever had to fight for what's yours, or learn who your real people are, hit that subscribe button. Share your stories below, I'd love to hear them. Because at the end of the day, we're all building something, and we're stronger when we do it together.
"Claire, you're becoming an embarrassment," my husband Eric said, not looking up from his laptop as I walked into our kitchen in Denver, Colorado. The words hit me like a physical blow, especially after the day I'd had at Sundale Financial, where I worked as a senior investment advisor. I had just closed a major client deal worth over $2 million, but instead of celebrating, I was walking into another evening of criticism. My name is Claire Beasley, and I'm 45 years old. For the past 18 years, I'd been married to Eric, a corporate attorney who worked at one of Denver's most prestigious law firms. We lived in a beautiful house in Cherry Creek, the kind of life that looked perfect from the outside. But lately, everything felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. The past year had been the hardest of my life. My father passed away in March after a long battle with cancer, and I'd been struggling to cope with the grief while maintaining my demanding career. The wine I'd been having with dinner had gradually become a way to numb the pain, and Eric had noticed. What started as concern had morphed into something much crueler. "I had a great day at work today," I said quietly, trying to shift the conversation. "The Morrison account finally—" "Nobody cares about your little victories when you can barely function as a wife," Eric interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Look at this kitchen. Look at yourself." I glanced around the kitchen, which was admittedly messy from the morning rush, then down at my work clothes that were wrinkled from a long day. His words stung, because there was just enough truth in them to make me doubt myself. I had been drinking more, and I had been struggling to keep up with everything. "Eric, I'm trying my best here. This year has been—" "Trying your best?" He laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Your best is pathetic, Claire. You're becoming unstable, and frankly, I'm tired of covering for you. Something cold settled in my stomach at his choice of words. Unstable seemed like such a calculated term, not something someone would say in the heat of an argument. But before I could process that feeling fully, Eric's phone rang. "I need to take this," he said, walking toward his home office. "Try not to embarrass yourself further tonight." As he disappeared down the hallway, I stood alone in the kitchen, feeling smaller than I had in years. The silence of the house pressed against me, and I found myself reaching for the wine bottle on the counter. But something made me stop. Maybe it was the way Eric had said unstable, or maybe it was just exhaustion. But I put the bottle back and poured myself a glass of water instead. Little did I know that this simple decision would change everything. The next morning, I woke up with a clearer head than I'd had in months. Eric had already left for work, which wasn't unusual, but I noticed he'd left his coffee mug on the nightstand instead of taking it to the kitchen. As I reached to grab it, something small and black caught my eye tucked behind the lamp base. My heart stopped. It was a voice recorder. I stared at the tiny device for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Why would Eric be recording me in our bedroom? My hands shook as I carefully examined it without moving it from its position. The red light indicated it was actively recording. Suddenly, every conversation we'd had recently took on a different meaning. Every time he'd goaded me into arguments, every time he'd accused me of being too emotional or irrational, every time he'd pushed me toward that wine bottle. It wasn't concern for my well-being. It was evidence gathering. I left the recorder exactly where it was and went downstairs to make breakfast, my mind racing. If Eric was secretly recording me, there had to be a reason. The word unstable from the night before echoed in my head. Was he building a case against me? Over breakfast, I forced myself to think logically. I'd been a successful financial advisor for over 15 years. I knew how to analyze situations, gather data, and make strategic decisions. If Eric was playing a game, I needed to understand the rules before I could figure out how to win. That evening, Eric came home with flowers, something he hadn't done in months. "I'm sorry about last night," he said, presenting them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know you're going through a rough time with your father's passing. Maybe we should talk to someone about getting you some help." "Help?" I asked, arranging the flowers in a vase. "Just someone to talk to. About the drinking, about your emotional state. I'm worried about you, Claire." There it was again. Language that seemed designed to establish a narrative. I smiled and nodded. "Maybe you're right. Let me think about it." That night, as Eric worked late in his office, I heard him on a phone call. The walls in our house weren't particularly thick, and his voice carried more than he probably realized. "She's getting worse," I heard him say. Yesterday she could barely hold a conversation without slurring her words. I crept closer to the office door, my heart pounding. "I know, baby, but we have to be patient. The recordings are building a solid case. By the time I file, she won't be able to claim anything." The word baby hit me like a slap. Eric was talking to another woman, about me, about recordings, about filing something. I backed away from the door slowly, pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. My husband wasn't just recording me. He was orchestrating my downfall. The realization that my husband was actively working to destroy me should have sent me into a spiral. Instead, it lit a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since my father's death, I had clarity of purpose. Eric thought he was dealing with a broken woman who would crumble under pressure. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day researching. I learned about hidden cameras, voice-activated recording devices, and digital surveillance equipment. If Eric wanted to play the evidence game, I'd show him how it was really done. My first stop was the electronics store in downtown Denver, where I purchased a small security camera system and several discrete recording devices. The sales clerk, a young man who looked like he knew his way around surveillance equipment, gave me a crash course in placement and retrieval. "You want these where there's natural conversation, but not obvious snooping," he explained. "Kitchen islands, coffee tables, anywhere people naturally gather and talk." By the time Eric came home that evening, I had transformed our house into a surveillance network. Hidden cameras in the living room and kitchen, voice recorders in his office and car, and backup devices in locations he'd never think to check. If he was recording me, I was going to record everything. Over the next week, I maintained the appearance of the grieving, struggling wife Eric expected to see. I poured wine at dinner, but barely touched it. I seemed distracted and emotional during our conversations. I played the part he needed me to play, while my devices captured every moment of his performance. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening. Eric thought I was upstairs taking a bath, but I was actually in our bedroom, listening through the baby monitor I'd repurposed to hear what was happening in his office. His mistress, I'd learned her name was Victoria, and she worked at his law firm, had come over for what Eric thought was a private meeting. "This worthless drunk won't get a penny," Eric laughed, and I could hear Victoria giggling in response. "She's too weak to fight back. By the time I'm done with her, she'll be lucky if she can afford a studio apartment." "Are you sure the recordings will hold up in court?" Victoria asked. "Please." I've got hours of her slurring her words, crying, acting completely unstable. No judge is going to award alimony to an alcoholic who can't take care of herself. What about her job? She makes good money. Not for long. I've already reached out to some contacts at her firm. A few anonymous tips about her drinking problem, and they'll start questioning her judgment with client accounts. She'll be fired within a month. I listened to them plan my complete destruction with the detached fascination of someone watching a nature documentary about predators. They had no idea they were being recorded. No idea that every word of their conspiracy was being captured in crystal clear audio. That night, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to gather evidence in secret, I decided to accelerate Eric's timeline. If he wanted me to appear unstable, I'd give him exactly what he was looking for, but on my terms. I started by calling Sundale Financial and speaking with my supervisor, Helena Reynolds. "Helena, I need to take some personal time," I said, making sure to sound slightly shaky. "I'm dealing with some family issues related to my father's estate, and I think I need a few weeks to get my head straight." Helena, who had been my mentor for years, was immediately concerned. "Claire, is everything okay? You've seemed stressed lately." "I'm fine," I said, letting a slight tremor creep into my voice. "I just need some time to figure things out. Eric thinks it might be good for me too." "Of course. Take all the time you need. Your job will be here when you're ready." Perfect. Now Eric would think his plan to isolate me professionally was working, but I'd actually protected myself by proactively taking leave rather than being fired. That evening, I staged the performance of my life. As Eric walked through the door, I was in the kitchen with a glass of wine in my hand, though it was actually grape juice mixed with water. I'd spilled some on my shirt and messed up my hair slightly. "Claire, what happened here?" Eric asked, and I could hear the barely contained excitement in his voice. "I had a bad day," I said, making sure to sound slightly slurred. "Helena thinks I need time off work. Maybe she's right. Maybe everyone's right about me." Eric moved closer, and I could practically see him calculating how this would play in divorce court. "Honey, I think you should sit down. You seem upset." "I called my sister today," I continued improvising. "Told her about how you've been helping me deal with Dad's death. She thinks I'm lucky to have such a supportive husband." The irony wasn't lost on me, but Eric ate it up. "I just want what's best for you, Claire. Maybe we should look into some treatment options. Treatment? I let my voice break slightly. You think I need treatment? I think you need help. And I'm going to make sure you get it. That night, after Eric went to sleep, I downloaded all the recordings from my devices and began organizing them into a comprehensive file. What I found was even worse than I'd imagined. Eric had been systematically documenting what he perceived as my failures for months, creating a narrative of decline that started well before my father's death. But more importantly, I had captured his real voice, the cruel, calculating man who laughed about destroying his wife's life with his mistress. The contrast between his public persona as a concerned husband and his private cruelty was startling. The next day, while Eric was at work, I made a phone call that would change everything. I'd researched investigative journalists in the Denver area and found Rachel Moore, who wrote for the Morning Ledger and specialized in stories about abuse of power and legal manipulation. Mr. Moore's office, came the professional voice of her assistant. I'd like to speak with Rachel Moore about a story involving legal fraud and domestic manipulation, I said, my voice steady and clear. Can I get your name and a brief description of the situation? My name is Claire Beasley. My husband is a prominent attorney who's been secretly recording me and manipulating evidence to build a false case for divorce. I have recordings of him admitting to conspiracy and planning to destroy my career. I think your readers would be very interested in how the legal system can be weaponized against innocent spouses. There was a pause. Please hold. Miss Moore will want to speak with you directly. 2 minutes later, Rachel Moore was on the line. Mrs. Beasley, tell me everything. Rachel Moore was everything I'd hoped for in an investigative journalist, sharp, skeptical, and absolutely relentless when she sensed a real story. We met the next day at a small cafe downtown, far from anywhere Eric might accidentally encounter us. Before we go any further, Rachel said, pulling out a recorder of her own, I need to make it clear that anything you tell me will be verified independently. I don't publish he said she said stories. I need evidence. I have evidence, I said, sliding a USB drive across the table. Hours of audio, video recordings, financial documents showing money being moved without my knowledge, and communications between my husband and his mistress detailing their entire plan. Rachel's eyebrows raised as she pocketed the drive. This sounds almost too convenient. Why are you coming to me instead of just using this in divorce court? Because this isn't just about my divorce, I said. Eric isn't the only attorney who's figured out how to game the system. He's told Victoria about other cases where he's used similar tactics. This is a pattern of behavior that goes beyond just one marriage. Victoria is the mistress? Victoria Hendricks. She's an associate at his firm, Bramcove Holdings Legal Division. According to my recordings, she's been helping him research ways to manipulate evidence in divorce proceedings. They've discussed at least 3 other cases where similar tactics were used. Rachel was taking notes furiously. What kind of timeline are we looking at? When is he planning to file? Based on what I've overheard, he's waiting for one more incident that will cement his case. He wants me to have some kind of public breakdown, or do something that will make his allegations seem credible. And you're not going to give him that. No, I'm going to give him something much worse. I'm going to give him the truth. Over the next week, Rachel worked with incredible efficiency. She verified my recordings with audio experts, cross-referenced the financial documents with public records, and even managed to interview 2 other women who had gone through divorces with attorneys from Eric's firm under suspicious circumstances. Meanwhile, I continued playing my part at home. Eric's behavior had become increasingly bold. He no longer bothered to hide his contempt for me, probably because he thought I was too broken to notice or remember clearly. On Wednesday evening, he brought Victoria to our house for dinner. The audacity of it took my breath away, but I maintained my composure. Claire, you remember Victoria from the firm Christmas party last year? Eric said, as if this was a perfectly normal social visit. Of course, I said, shaking Victoria's hand and noting how she avoided eye contact. It's so nice of you to come check on me. Eric's told you about my rough patch, I'm sure. Victoria glanced at Eric nervously. He mentioned you've been going through a difficult time. Oh yes, very difficult. Sometimes I feel like my whole world is falling apart, and I don't even know why. I let my voice carry just the right amount of fragility. It's like someone is systematically destroying everything I care about, and I'm too stupid to understand how. The irony was delicious. Victoria actually squirmed in her chair. During dinner, they became increasingly relaxed, probably assuming I was too damaged to pick up on their subtle communications and inside jokes. What they didn't know was that every word was being recorded by 3 different devices I had strategically placed throughout the dining room. You know what? Eric said as Victoria was leaving. I think Claire's finally starting to understand that she needs help. Sometimes people have to hit rock bottom before they can accept reality. That's so true, Victoria agreed. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop enabling someone's destructive behavior. After she left, Eric turned to me with what I'm sure he thought was a compassionate expression. Claire, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about getting you some professional help. You're probably right, I said. Maybe it's time I face the truth about my situation. I wasn't lying. It was definitely time for the truth. Rachel called me Friday morning with news that made my heart race. We're ready to publish Sunday. The editors have reviewed everything, our legal team has cleared it, and we've got enough corroboration to make this bulletproof. Are you prepared for what comes next? What do you mean? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. Once this story breaks, your life is going to change dramatically. Eric will know you've been investigating him. His firm will likely face scrutiny, and you'll be in the middle of a very public scandal. Are you ready for that level of attention? I thought about the woman I'd been a month ago, grieving, isolated, questioning my own sanity as my husband systematically tore down my self-worth. Then I thought about the woman I was now, clear-headed, strategic, and absolutely done with being anyone's victim. I'm ready, I said. But I want to be prepared. What's the headline going to be? Local attorney caught on recording planning to frame wife as alcoholic in divorce scheme. We've got sidebar stories about the other cases and an editorial about legal ethics reform. This is going to be front page, above the fold. That weekend was surreal. Eric was in an unusually good mood, probably because he thought his plan was nearing completion. He even suggested we go out to dinner Saturday night, something we hadn't done in months. You seem like you're feeling better, he said over dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. More like your old self. I think I'm finally accepting reality, I said, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said to him in weeks. That's all anyone can ask for. Sometimes the people who love us see things we can't see about ourselves. The sincerity in his voice was almost impressive. If I hadn't heard the recordings of him laughing about destroying me, I might have actually believed he cared. Sunday morning arrived with unusual quiet. Eric was sleeping in, which was rare for him, and I was up early making coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. It's live. Check the Morning Ledger website. I opened my laptop and there it was. My story splashed across the front page of Denver's most widely read newspaper. The headline was even more damning than Rachel had described. Prominent attorney secretly recorded wife. Planned false alcoholism claims in divorce conspiracy. The article was devastating. Rachel had woven together the audio recordings, financial evidence, and expert commentary into a narrative that painted Eric not as a concerned husband, but as a manipulative predator who had weaponized the legal system against his own wife. The recordings of him laughing with Victoria about my supposed weakness were particularly damning. But what really made my heart sing was the sidebar story about the other women. Rachel had found not just 2, but 4 other cases where Eric's firm had used similar tactics. The paper was calling for an investigation into the entire practice. I heard Eric's alarm go off upstairs and quickly closed the laptop. Within minutes, his phone started ringing. "What the hell?" I heard him shouting from the bedroom. "How did they get this? Who gave them these recordings?" His footsteps thundered down the stairs as I calmly sipped my coffee. Eric appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, holding his phone with a look of absolute panic. "Claire," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "We need to talk." "Good morning to you too, honey," I said pleasantly. "You seem upset. Bad news?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when he realized that the broken woman he'd been manipulating no longer existed. "You did this," he said quietly. "Did what?" I asked, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm just a worthless drunk, remember? Too weak to fight back." The next few hours unfolded exactly as I had hoped they would. Eric's phone didn't stop ringing. Calls from his law firm, reporters, family members who had seen the story, and presumably Victoria, though he wasn't taking those calls in front of me anymore. "You recorded me," he said, pacing around our kitchen like a caged animal. "You've been recording me this entire time." "Interesting choice of words," I said calmly. "Almost like you're familiar with the concept of secret recordings." "This is different. What I was doing was what, Eric? Justified? Legal? Necessary?" I stood up and faced him directly. "You hid recording devices in our bedroom. You conspired with your mistress to destroy my career. You planned to take everything I've worked for and leave me with nothing. So please explain to me how what I did was different." For the first time in months, Eric had no response. The man who had made his living crafting arguments and manipulating language was speechless. My phone rang, and I answered it without taking my eyes off Eric. "Hello?" "Mrs. Beasley, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the Morning Ledger story. Would you be available today?" "I'd be happy to tell my story," I said loudly enough for Eric to hear. "Let me check my schedule and get back to you." As I hung up, Eric's face had gone completely white. "Claire, think about what you're doing. If this goes any further, it's going to destroy both of us." "You already destroyed us, Eric. I'm just making sure the truth comes out." His phone buzzed with a text, and I watched his face crumble as he read it. "My firm is placing me on administrative leave pending an investigation," he said quietly. "That's unfortunate," I replied. "I suppose they don't appreciate attorneys who commit fraud and conspiracy. Who would have thought? You don't understand what you've done. My career." "Your career built on lies and manipulation?" "Yes. I think I understand perfectly." By Tuesday, the story had taken on a life of its own. The Colorado Bar Association announced they were opening an ethics investigation. 2 other women had come forward with similar stories about Eric's firm. Victoria had been placed on leave as well, and according to Rachel, she was already looking for a new job outside of Denver. I, meanwhile, had become something of a folk hero. My inbox was flooded with messages from women who had gone through similar experiences, divorce attorneys offering to represent me, and reporters wanting to interview me about domestic manipulation and legal abuse. The irony wasn't lost on me that Eric's plan to isolate and destroy me had instead connected me with a community of people who understood exactly what I had been through. Wednesday afternoon, Eric came home to find me packing boxes in his office. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Packing your things. I filed for divorce this morning, and my attorney advised me to document all marital assets before you try to hide them." I held up a financial statement. "Speaking of which, I found the account where you've been transferring our joint savings. Very thorough of you to leave such a clear paper trail. Claire, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers. Actually, we do. See, unlike you, I'm going to do this the legal way. No secret recordings, no manipulation, no conspiracy. Just facts and evidence presented in open court." Eric sank into a chair, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "What do you want?" "I want what I've always wanted, Eric. I want respect. I want honesty. and I want justice. I closed the box I was packing and looked at him directly. The difference is, now I'm going to get all three. The man who had once called me too weak to fight back was finally learning just how strong I really was. 6 months later, as I sat in my new apartment overlooking downtown Denver, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The divorce had been finalized in my favor, Eric's legal career was effectively over, and I had returned to work at Sundale Financial with a promotion and the respect of my colleagues. My revenge hadn't been about destruction. It had been about truth, and truth had set me free in ways I never could have imagined.